to Liz.
Sorry, couldn't get unmuted. Hopefully you can all hear me now. Can anybody hear me? Excellent. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yay. So thank you all for giving up what a lovely evening. I'll try and keep this short and sweet. Normally we would have a full sort of training day, but with the COVID-19 issues, we've had to condense it into some online training. But there is lots of information that is on the website for the survey, and there's plenty in your information packs which were emailed out today as well, or you can contact us. So it'll be a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but if there's any questions, do let us know. But welcome to JBatS 2020. So this evening I'm going to give a brief introduction and talk a little bit about bats and why we need to monitor bats, and the different ways that we can actually go about surveying bats, what we know about bats in Jersey, and then talk about the actual JBatS project itself and how you can take part, as well as taking any questions. But as Sarah said, if you've got questions as we go along, pop them in the chat box. Either some of my colleagues who are present tonight might know the answers. It's quick and simple. They might be able to just answer that for you. If not, we'll save them to the end and we can go through them then. So starting straight off with bats. Now, bats are incredible creatures. They can fly, and this lovely photograph here by Daniel Whitby is a greater horseshoe bat, and we can see here how nice and clear you've got the fingers which make up the structure of the wing and hold that wing membrane out, which then ties onto their feet. So this enables these tiny little mammals to fly around and have very strong and powerful flight. So they are truly incredible creatures. They are the only mammal that is capable of true flight. And there are lots of different species of this mammal that have developed over the years. And the number of species known to us of bats is increasing all the time with the research that's being done and genetic analysis. So at the moment, there's over 1,400 different species of bats. And they cover the globe, with the exception of Antarctica. Bats are present on every continent. And they're great ecosystems, eco-service providers. Because there's so many different species of bats that have all developed in different, characterized in different ways, they all have different niches. And so bats in the tropics can be great pollinators. There's a lot of nectar-feeding bats. There's bats that eat fruit and therefore perfect for seed dispersal. And because they're flying, they can travel big distances. They're great for reforesting areas by dropping seeds. And their guano is a superb fertilizer. But here in Jersey, our bats eat insects. And for those of us that, like you or like me, on an evening like this, I'll be out and about and I will get eaten to death by lots of mosquitoes or midges and that kind of thing. Whereas bats in Jersey, especially our pipistrelles, which are most common, can eat around about 3,000 insects on a night, and a lot of those will be the mosses and midges and things. So I'm truly grateful on a personal level for that. But these tiny creatures have an incredibly long lifespan, despite their size and their incredibly high metabolic rate. The small myotis bat, the Brandt's bat, is known to live for over 40 years, and that's only 7 grams of that. So it's tiny. So they're truly incredible creatures, and because of that long lifespan and their incredibly well-developed immune system, they're really important creatures for us to study to understand more about ways of improving our health and life expectancy. But they're also internationally protected because they are such an incredible creature, and due to loss of habitats and all sorts of other threats, you know, they are in decline. So that brings me on to why we want to monitor that. Well, Jersey is signed up to several international obligations to protect and monitor these incredible creatures, as well as just protect other wildlife. And a couple of them are given here. Some bats are migratory species, so they're really important to be able to monitor. And I've got an unstable Wi-Fi signal here, so can I just check that people can still see or hear the screen?
Yes, I can still.
Thank you, Sarah. Our Wi-Fi hasn't been brilliant recently, so I might just occasionally just check in. So yeah, we need to protect and monitor our bats. It's legal obligation. But also by monitoring our bat populations, this helps us to inform policy and strategy to protect not only bats but also other aspects of our environment. Bats can indicate the health of our landscape and our insect diversity, which again is dependent on other aspects like our water bodies and the health of our general environment. Bats are very sensitive to temperature and therefore their populations and the movements of their populations can provide really good information about climate change and mammals. And we've also got so much more to learn. The more time we answer questions, we need to find out more that we don't know. But counting bats isn't actually easy. They fly around, so they don't stay still, and they can fly very fast. And they also tend to fly about in the dark, so we can't see them very easily. There are new technologies coming on with thermal imaging and things, but it's not an easy thing to do. Bats are also quite difficult to find when they're protected. They're very innocent, but they're small, but they kind of hide in little crevices or tend to be in inaccessible areas. So they're not that easy to see and count, even during the day when they're at rest. And they're inaudible, they're not very loud, and their calls they make are generally in spectrum of very high frequencies, which are very difficult to detect or impossible to detect by human ear. So how do we actually go about surveying bats if they're so difficult? Well, we do still look and listen for bats. We can find bat roosts by looking for signs of bats, like looking for bat droppings. And when we know where a roost is, we can count bats coming out of the roost. So that means sitting around at dusk or dawn, watching bats either come out of the roost or go back in. And also, what's really important is members of the public, when they see bats, either just flying around or if they happen to see a bat emerging from a property, actually reporting those sightings so that roost counts can be done and we can add more records to inform our research and also for planning and other aspects. Well, we do listen to bats, but we have to use special detectors to listen to bats, and we can do this in two different ways. We can have a handheld detector that we walk around and we listen to the bats as well as look out for the bats so we can see the bats flying, or we can use these detectors. And the static detectors are really good because we can leave that all night, so we can listen to the activity throughout the night without actually sitting there and holding the detector and freezing to death. It can get a bit chilly at night. And this is what the JBatS project is all about, is the static survey. There are other things that you can do to survey bats, and that's the advanced survey technique that you use for research, which involves catching bats and potentially adding radio traps to them to find roosts, watch where they're foraging, and looking at the breeding condition and finding out more about the bats. And that's the way to identify some of the cryptic species, some of the difficult to identify, like the myotis bats, which all have very similar echolocation calls. But the only way you can really tell those is by be looking at them in their hands. So as we're focused on listening to bats, I thought I'd show you the bat detectors and talk about bat detectors. So these are the bat detectors that are used in, generally used in research and commercial surveys for bats. These are highly specialised, very expensive pieces of kit. They're quite bulky and they need to be quite sturdy because they can be left out in the countryside for prolonged periods. But they're very expensive, so it makes this kind of survey work impractical and too costly. The survey work depends on echolocation calls. So what are these echolocation calls? Well, these are kind of like the signatures that we are looking at to be able to identify the different species of bats that are present and that we've recorded on these detectors. And bats use echolocation calls for a couple of things. They use them to find their way around. They can see. So sometimes they might not echolocate if it's still light and they're just coming out of their roost, which they know quite well. But most of the time they will be using echolocation to actually hear their way around their surroundings and to know where trees are or any other objects, so they avoid banging into things. But they also use their echolocation calls to locate and hone in on their prey. But these echolocation calls generally extremely high frequency, way above the frequencies that we can hear. So here's some examples of the different types of calls and how we can discriminate between the different species of bats. So at the top here we've got a very different looking bat call to the rest of them, and this is at a constant frequency of about 110 kilohertz, and that's from a lesser horseshoe bat. The pipistrelles are characteristically these kind of like hockey shaped bits. And if we listen to these on a heterodyne detector, they sound a bit like that because they come through a range of frequencies, but you've got a fairly long bit of call at the bottom at almost at a constant frequency. On the other extreme, we've got these myotis bat calls, which are very, very short in duration and look very similar. And if when we're recording them, the recording misses off some of the top frequencies, they can actually all look very, very similar, and it's very difficult to discriminate between the two. This long-eared bat call is slightly similar to the myotis calls. It has a secondary element to the call, which helps us to identify those and discriminate between the myotis bat calls. The nocturals and lysis bats have a much lower frequency, and they tend to be quite longer calls because they tend to fly quite high and therefore aren't sort of trying to avoid lots of obstacles. And some people can just about hear these calls as they walk right the way down to about 20 kilohertz. But as bats change their calls depending on where they're flying and what they're doing, this is just a guide and it's not quite as easy as that in real life. The calls just don't fit into the boxes quite as easily, unfortunately. But there's been a lot of research in Jersey over the last 20 years, and a lot of these surveys have all used acoustic surveys as an element of that. But they've also been supported by roost visits, by tracking, for some of the more advanced studies. And one of the projects that's used the acoustic project is the Woodland project that the Jersey Bat Group were doing in 2016, 17 and 18. And this was probably the precursor to the thoughts of the JBatS project coming about to some degree, as Henry was leading the acoustic surveys for that Woodland project. But the IBATS project is the current main monitoring programme, and this uses a massive network of routes right across the island, and these are acoustic surveys, but these are done by driven transects. So the microphone is moving along those transects, and these 11 routes are done twice a year during July and August. So it's a huge effort in office time to drive around and collect all of these recordings. But it's a fantastic amount of data, and that these recordings cover the whole island. But unfortunately, bats that like to fly along hedgerows that line the lanes and the routes are possibly recorded more frequently than the bats that may be foraging within the woodlands themselves, and it's very difficult to actually drive through the more dense wooded popular areas. So we might be missing the calls in the IBATS data from bats within those spaces. So what do we know about bats in Jersey after all of this research? Well, we now know that we've got records for over 18 species, well, for about 18 species of bats. And these different species of bats live lots of different habitats, from dense woodlands to open woodlands, to edges of woodlands, to agricultural areas, gardens, and some actually prefer urban environments. So there's a lot of different habitat preferences from this broad range of species of bats that we know are or have been in Jersey. Now, some of them we know are resident, and some we suspect are just vagrant or occasional visitors, and there's just some that we just know very little about apart from an occasional record, which is one of the reasons why we want to get as much information as possible using these detectors. Which brings me on to the JBatS survey itself and JBatS 2020. So JBatS 2018 was our first starting point, and this is when Henry, who you can see here in the woodland and busy at his laptop, undertook a master's degree and launched JBatS as a pilot study to compare it against the IBATS Translate system. And this was a partnership between the university he was studying at, which was University College London, and the Bat Conservation Trust, as well as the Government of Jersey. This study looked at 90 different sites, and we had 30 detectors, so we covered 30 sites each night, and we broke the island up into 3 sections. So we did the west, we did the centre, and then we did the east, and then we rotated it around again. And we did that for a couple of weeks until each site had been surveyed at least 3 times, and we've mocked up a few ones that had failures. And the sites were selected on a proportional basis for habitat coverage of the island. And the whole thing was made possible by the development of this new piece of kit at the time, which is the Audiomoth detector. So unlike the big heavy-duty detectors used for research with their heavy-duty cases, this is a very small, it's the size of 3 AA batteries with a circuit board attached, which makes it much more cost-effective, and it's been developed by researchers for wildlife research, and so it's much more cost-effective. It's an open source firmware run on it, so people are developing it on a not-for-profit basis. So that made this whole JBatS approach affordable. So Henry then took a map of Jersey, looked at all of the habitat classifications from the phase 1 habitat survey, and split those up into the sort of key areas on a grid square basis of the different types of habitat, and then selected sites within those areas that would represent that habitat, and we went about within all these detectors. So there was a small group of us, and we ran around the countryside, and we put these detectors up in all sorts of different places, trying to be representative of the habitat. So making sure that the microphone was actually overlooking the area that we were trying to survey. And you know, it took us to lots of interesting places, some places I've never seen before. And by the time we finished all of that, we managed to cover all of these dots of all these different locations. And then Henry went back to university and started to analyse the data. So he was using a computer-generated algorithm system for looking at the bat calls and identifying them. and then he was looking at the calls that had been recorded and against the types of areas that they were recorded in, as well as comparing it to the JBatS study. And what he found was that the woodlands were a very strong sector of bat activity, which is no surprise because so many of the species of bats that we expect to find in Jersey like woodland areas, and we've got insects to be found in woodlands. But grassland and agricultural land were also quite strongly associated with bat activity. But we only had, because proportional representation only gave us one detector site by a water body, and we realised that this was potentially underrepresented in the 2018 survey data. So we changed the model come 2019. What was also evident in 2018 was a small band of people can't really do that sustainably, putting out that number of detectors. So we launched the citizen science element to the survey, and Henry's really artistic and came up with some great flyers and engagement. And we managed to survey 50 sites, again on 3 non-consecutive nights, but this time with more equal habitat representation. And this gave us this map, and it's these areas that we'd like to resurvey this year. So the outcomes from 2019 is that we got over 30 volunteers attended the training day, and most took part in the survey. There were a few technical issues, but generally most people found it easy to contribute. The BAT Identify, which is this auto classification system, did show to be quite reliable for the demonstration of pipistrelles and ceratines, but for the more difficult species, the myotis species, and the picotas, the long-eared, it was a little bit more difficult. So for the power analysis, to be able to get good, reliable data for strategic planning and policy influencing, the power of the study did indicate that we probably needed 120 site surveys 6 times for it to have the best amount of power. But as the accuracy of the classification of the BAT Identify classifiers is improving over time, that may change that number. And he also suggested that maybe we'd look at designing a core library for a bespoke classifier for Jersey. But how realistic that is to be seen. So that brings us neatly on to the JBatS 2020 and the survey. So the Bat Conservation Trust in the UK has been running some similar pilot studies to the JBatS one in different areas of the UK, and they're now getting to the stage where they're wanting to launch a pipeline where people can upload their data and that they can then feed back results to the participants, and they can collate this all in one area. So we were interested in partnering up with the Bat Conservation Trust for this, and working closely with them because it's a very similar project. Of their methodologies have been slightly different to ours, so we're trying to align our methodologies and have a look at the method of getting this feedback to volunteers. So we'll be taking a small snapshot of the data that we get this year through the ECT system, but we'd also like to see what our capacity is like for volunteer engagement, so that we can design the survey with maximum coverage. But be realistic with the amount of coverage that we want to achieve. So in essence, the JBatS and the BBAT project is summarised in this little graphic here, where you've got the bat flying about, echolocating, and those echolocation calls being recorded on these little Audiomoth devices that we're going to place out around the countryside. And then the data from these is then uploaded into the cloud and goes through the computer algorithm, and is split into bat calls, which are then identified as close to species as possible. And then that information goes into the biological record centres and gets fed back to the individual volunteers. So there's a short summary of the bats that they've detected. And we're hoping, as I said, to try and cover these squares. So when volunteers sign up, we'd meet up and sit and look at the computers together and hone in on these areas. But we're going to have to be a bit clever and do this by email and conversation to try and select the sites that are closest to you that you're interested in surveying, and distribute these out between the volunteers. So what we're asking you to do, well, obviously sign up and participate. And then we've got the whole of the month of July to do these surveys. And so what's important is to pick some good nights to go out and do our surveys. So we want to avoid nights that are really windy or really wet, as the wind and the rain will not only affect the bird flight and their co-location, but it will also make the calls really difficult to pick out on the recording, as the sound of the rain is very similar to some of the bat calls and drowns them out. So check the weather forecast, decide on when you're going to go survey, and then go and stick your detectors. So we will be providing you with packs, a kit. So you should have all real essentials to be able to do this. So here we've got a bat detector that is stuck in the ground, quite securely because it's probably quite easy to poke the stick into that particular area of ground, but in some places you might just need to cable tie to vegetation surrounding it. Here there's a great little gate post very close to the field that needs to be recorded. So Sana here is cable tied the cane with the Audiomoth attached to it onto a fence post. So it's important to make sure that the microphone is pointing in the right direction and that the cane is stable enough so it's not going to turn around and start recording what's in the hedge once you've turned your back on it, which does occasionally happen. But we've got time to repeat any if that's the case. So just to get to know the Audiomoth a little better, this tiny hole here is the microphone. And so it's important that when you set your Audiomoth up in its case, that this microphone hole aligns to the microphone hole in the cover. And the other elements that you need to know about are the switch. So this USB off point in the center is its off position. And when we turn it on, we turn it to custom. And this is the slot for the SD card. It has a nice little graphic which reminds us which way up the SD card needs to be when we slot it in. This is a circuit board, it is quite fragile and it's just attached to a battery pack. So when we pop the SD card into the circuit board, it's useful just to hold the circuit board kind of at the edges securely and then pop the SD card in. If you hold on to the battery packs, it might be dislodge the circuit board slightly. So they are quite delicate, they do require a fair degree of care. They also have some flashing lights, and these will be in your guide. These flashing lights are underneath the circuit board on the opposite side of the detector to the battery. And they're very tiny and they are a little bit difficult to see, but you should be able to see them eventually. If you've about to deploy your detector, you put it to custom and your green light's flashing, that's perfect, because it's just showing you that it's asleep and it's waiting to go into recording. If you've deployed your detector a little bit late and it's already 8 o'clock, it might already have a red light on and it's already recording. If you've got both lights flashing, then there's an error and you need to reconfigure the Audiomoth. And if you get stuck, give us a call. But it should be relatively straightforward. As you switch the detector off, you'll get some flashing red lights and that will indicate the battery level. It's not overly reliable, and the batteries that we've chosen should provide you with all the recording nights that you need. But if you're unsure, again, do get in touch. So these are the batteries sitting in the case, and you can see that there's a switch here which we've got two different types of Audiomoth. The original ones with switch stuck out, so there's a little cutout in the case so that you can move the switch to start either way. Because the microphone is on the other side, and that lines up with the microphone cover on the other side. So it's important that this gap here, where you've got a bit of case, is the side that your switch is on. But again, just be gentle with them because they are very delicate. So here's an example of the case. There's the microphone hole, and you've got like a little rain cover. So it's important when we put this back detector up that the detector is vertical, so that the rain can wash down over the top of this little cover. So I won't go on about checking the forecast because Sarah's already waved at me about time, I think. And so yeah, check the forecast and carry out your survey at any time throughout July. Check it switched on before you deploy it. So that's switching it to custom, and the green lights will flash. And if you put the Audiomoth then into the cover of your lid so that it actually well fits into the lid, you can then gently press it onto the case. Because the cases are watertight, the air needs to come out. The only way the air comes out if it closes generally is through the microphone cover, and we don't want to blow those off. So it's just a case of gently pressing it in, so pressing that lid onto the top. The case itself has a couple of holes which allow these cable ties to just pop through, and they can securely attach it then to your cane. I'm not going to go through everything on this equipment list, and you don't need to remember it because it should all be in your pack. But we give you the majority of the stuff here, but there's some additional things that you might want to take that would be handy. If you've got guide ropes and tent pegs, that can help secure the pole, especially if the ground is really dry, because it has been quite dry recently. So we probably don't need to tape measure because we've done physical distancing at 2 meters for such a long time that we could probably all get that. A little pair of scissors if you need to cut the cable ties. The cable ties that we provide to secure the pole to vegetation are the reusable ones, so they're easy just to undo and take with you. And a cloth in case it's been raining or wet, just to dry it outside of the case before you open it up. A pen in your survey forms are great to make some records, but your phone is good if you can take photos of the detector in place. But also if you need to play the chime, if the battery's dislodged, you can do that. And use your phone for GPS coordinates of your where you've actually deployed the detector. When you go to your site, just make sure that it's safe, because you know, your safety is our priority more than the detectors. And make sure that it's going to be secure enough to leave overnight. So if you're deploying a detector in an urban environment, you might want to make sure you might want to take a little step or something to make sure it's out of arm's reach. And if it can be avoided artificial light at night, then that's useful. So not directly under the street lamp if possible. And if you can try and make sure that your detector is placed 1.5 meters away from anything that's going to mask the back calls, such as hard surfaces, tree trunks, walls, and that kind of thing, that's really useful. It makes the calls easier to identify. So here's the detector on its stick, ready to stick in the ground. So we can see it's facing upright at the top of the stick. And then, like I said, we've seen this before, where to pop the detector. And then just to make sure that you actually record the location of your survey form. And then the following day, you need to return to the site and pick up your detector, the cane, any cable ties. You don't want to leave any litter. Once you're away from where you might drop tiny little SD cards, so inside your car or back at home, you can take the lid off the detector. The case can stay on the pole if needs be, but you then want to just turn it off, take out the SD card, and we're going to give you numbered card holders that correspond to the survey location. and just complete the survey form, which is really just your details and the survey site details. And then you can repeat for the further deployment. We've done the flashing lights before, so we'll skip on. So if your batteries do come loose, you will need to reconfigure the Audiomoth, and the configuration of the Audiomoth tells it when to record and when to switch off, so it's only recording at night. And to do this, you need to play it to sound. So you'll need to flick the switch to default position and then play this chime. It's a little bit tricky. You need to play with the volume a little bit to get that sound to be picked up by the detector at the right level for it to reprogram itself. But as soon as it does that, the green flashing light will turn to a solid green light. But if you have any problems, do let us know. But hopefully you won't need to change the batteries because they will all be set up and ready to go beforehand. But all of these instructions are on the BCC website. So how do you get involved? Well, you should all have received a pack, and if you haven't, let me know and I will send out some more packs. But first off, can you look at the working agreement form, have a quick read through that, and if you've got any questions, let us know. But as soon as we receive your working agreement forms, we can get you signed up to come and collect your kit. If you haven't got printers, don't worry, we can make an appointment for you to come and collect your kit and select your survey site, and we can fill out the volunteer working agreement form then. But go to the British VAT and JBatS survey pages on the BCT's website, which again, there should be a link in the pack, and you can see all the instructions there. And have a think about the sites that you would like to do on the map. If you give us an idea of the places that you go to or are close by your house as your starting point, we can then hopefully select the sites that are suitable for you through email correspondence. So after the surveys are complete, a small sample will be going to BCT to be analysed by them and provide feedback to the rest of you. I will try and analyse as many of the sounds as I can, just to give you some kind of feedback from each of the recordings, but that will take some time, so it will be done over time. But most importantly, we want your feedback, because we want to hear your experiences of this survey, the likelihood of you participating in the future, how we can make it more interesting, and you know, get people involved. And I'd just like to say a really big thank you for just signing up for this and having spent a sunny evening indoors on Zoom, and welcome any questions. So you can unmute yourself if you want to, or Sarah will give me questions.
Hello. Thank you very much. So if anyone has any questions, they can either unmute themselves, or you can write them in the chat and we'll go through them. We've got one that's from Iris. Are these slides in the pack as well?
No, but we can, they will be made available on your YouTube website, but I can turn them into a PDF and they can be sent out to anybody that wants them, or be on the JBC's website.
Fantastic, that would be really helpful. So we will we'll get them as a PDF, and then we can send them to you so you can have a copy of the slides to go through at your own pace. But the video is going to be recorded, and so if you did miss anything at the start, you'll be able to kind of rewatch Liz and go through it, and kind of pause it, maybe look at your the things that you've been sent, and kind of go through it at your own pace. Any other questions? Are we able to survey in areas we have seen bats, or are the survey points strictly chosen?
Well, we want to survey the sites that have been surveyed before, and as close to the survey points that were there before. There may be, we may be able to depending on how many volunteers we've got and how many people are prepared to do 3 nights, we may be able to add some additional points. If people are really keen to record what's going on in their garden, if it's not everybody, we might be able to do a few of those and then have analyse that data. But until we've got automated data analysis, it does take time to look through that because they are continuously recording. So there's a lot of sound files to go through. So, you know, if people have a specific interest, there may be other bat detectors that are easier to use in the garden that we can practice. If people are members of the bat group, they can possibly look at borrowing or something at some point. But you know, we want to encourage people to be interested in bats. But this particular survey is about gathering data.
We've got a question from John. When do the forms need to be returned?
The volunteer forms as soon as possible, so we can get you booked in for kit. We're going to be distributing the kits from Howday's Farm on Saturday.
Which Saturday?
This coming Saturday, so that everybody will have them in time for the 1st of July. But we need to do this by appointment because of the COVID restrictions, and we may be able to accommodate different setups for people who can't make Saturday. So if you're interested and you can't do Saturday, let us know and we'll see what we can work out. We want as many people who want to participate, we want to facilitate that. But the actual survey forms themselves are very short, and they come back in with the SD card. So if you've done one survey early on, say the 2nd of July, but aren't planning on doing another one till a few days later, we can take that data sooner rather than later, and we may be able to do a few sort of call analysis to see what's on yours and feed them back before they get sent off. So, you know, if we get them in dribs and drabs, it may give us a bit more chance to have a look at a few more of the calls and see what we've got. But the sooner we get the data in, the sooner we can have a look at it. But we have the whole of the month of July to collect data.
So how many nights do you need the detectors to be put out?
At each site, only one, but we can put them out for additional nights. So if you put them out on a night and you came back and found that it was facing into the hedge, when you came back and it swiveled round and you thought, well, that might not be the best recording, you can put it out again and secure it slightly differently. But we might just need to make sure that you've got sufficient battery capacity. You might need to go get an extra set of batteries to make sure that the batteries last. The battery should last 4 or 5 nights of recording. So if everyone's just doing 3 sites, that should be, the battery supply would be sufficient. But if you're doing any more than that, but what we do want to make sure is that each SD card is only used at one site. So the SD cards are going to be numbered according to the site. So if you move the detector to the next site, we do need to make sure that it's got the correct SD card in them.
Just having a look to see. How do we get our sites?
Again, if you let me know where, normally without COVID, we'd sit down at a computer together and look at the map and hone in on the different areas and allocate them around. So it's a little bit first come, first serve. But if you tell me the areas of Jersey that you are most particularly interested in surveying, so it could be that it's the places that are closest to your home or the places that you like to go wildlife watching, then I will look at the map and try and find the places that are still available that fit your criteria, and we can have a chat on either like this on a Zoom or Teams or something, so you can share my screen and have a look at the maps, or we can just do it by email. So it will be dependent on each particular person's preferences, really.
Have the landowners already been contacted?
Some of the landowners, oh, sorry.
Or I was going to say, or is that something the volunteer will have to do?
So if it's a site that's been done before, we hope we will have contacted all of the landowners. Some have been contacted, but we haven't been responded to yet. Some are difficult to identify. But if it's a specific site that somebody else is wanting to do in an area that's not been surveyed before, and we've already covered the 50, then we might work with them to try and identify the landowner. So yeah, we will do as much of the landowner stuff as we can, and support you if you want to help do some of the land ownership.
So can we get 3 sites? Someone is very keen and wants to do more than one. So is that something we can do? We can have more than one site.
Yes, definitely.
How do we remove the units? I think, are you referring to the actual kind of the little like casing, or if you want to unmute yourself and maybe.
Hi, sorry, what I meant was, when do we place the monitors and when do we have to remove them? So like, what's the time frame looking at for the best night recording?
So if you put the recorders out before 8 o'clock, they will start recording at 8 o'clock in the evening and stop at 5 o'clock in the morning. So we want to have them in place before 8 o'clock. And we won't expect you to get up before 5 o'clock to pick them up. So you can pick them up any time during the next day. But yeah, if you look at the weather forecast and just choose a day that you think would be suitable, that fits with your daily time frames and availability, we just ask that you avoid nights of particularly wet or particularly windy, because those are not conducive for bat activity, but they're also not ideal for the bat detectors either. So you can choose your night, so it can be just those 3 nights. It may well be that people are thinking, the feedback we get might be that people want to do more sites. It may be that people want to do the same site more frequently. But this is what we're hoping to get feedback from volunteers as to how the survey would be most engaging to them.
Okay, cool, thank you.
I was muted. We've got a question about public access. So the sites that you have selected, are they all quite easy to access?
Henry selected the original site, and some of them involve going through gorse and things. So I'm not sure how many of those are still on the 2019 ones. I was very familiar with the 2018 sites, but we had volunteers doing 2019, so I didn't see all of those sites. So yes, hopefully they will be public accessible, and we wouldn't ask anybody to go to anywhere that involves any element of risk. There is a risk assessment goes with it. We only want people to do what they're happy and comfortable to do with, and we don't want people scratching themselves to death wading through a gorse bush, because that's not what we ask people to do. So although there will be accessible, and they're a kilometre square, and they were asking for the habitat type. So within that, so if it's a woodland area within that kilometre square, you've got some choice as to whereabouts in that wooded area that you choose. So if one field has got cattle grazing in it, you may choose, and you're doing an agricultural field, you may choose the next door field that doesn't have cattle grazing in it, because that's much safer for access. But then we might need to just double check permissions with the farmer, because it might not be the same landowner.
Katie, Liz will be able to work with you, because you said that you're new to Jersey, so kind of maybe start you off with a site that's really easy to find, and then you can kind of like build your way up to explore kind of some hidden areas of Jersey as well. So we are coming close to 8 o'clock. Has anyone got any questions to finish us off with?
Well, if not, I'd just like to say a huge thank you for coming along this evening. And sorry it was quite rushed. It's a lot to put into such a short space of time. But the information is all there. All the details of the survey are on the BCT website and repeated in the information pack that we sent out. So, you know, do read through those things. And if you're still unsure of something, do just give me a bell, and we can talk it through on a one-to-one. And I just hope that lots of you enjoy doing the survey.
Thank you very much. So Liz, I hope you don't mind. I've put your email a few times in this chat. So if anyone does have any further questions, you can contact Liz, and yeah, go through that pack and have a think on it. And we hope we'll be able to see you all again in person, maybe quite soon, where we can maybe go through some things again, or have a kind of like a results evening. I think that would be great if we could do that at the end of the year to see kind of what we've all found. So thank you very much, Liz. That was really fantastic. I'm quite excited now to get my pack.
Excellent. We'll get you volunteer for me.
Yeah, I will. So if you want to unmute yourselves and say thank you, Liz, you've got lots of thanks in the chat, or if you want to just, some people have used the little clap icon in their reactions area. So if you want to say a big thank you to Liz.
Thank you. Well, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to stay in here just for a little bit because I can see some questions coming through, but you are welcome to leave the Zoom meeting. Thank you very much. Just type your email one more time.
Okay. Just looking through if there's any other questions. Oh, thank you. Thanks, Sarah, for sorting that out.
All right.
Really facilitated as always.
Thank you. Okay, doesn't seem there's any more questions, so that's a wrap. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.